There are places in this world that people instinctively avoid. Buildings where the air itself feels heavy, and with every step you have the feeling that something is watching you. The St. Stephen Hospital was one of those places. It was closed 15 years ago, but locals still cross to the other side of the street when they pass by. But there was someone who wasn't afraid. Someone who not only entered the abandoned building, but lived there. For years. In secret. William Thompson was 63 years old when St. Stephen Hospital permanently closed. He had worked there as a janitor for 30 years, knowing every corner, every corridor. When the last patient left the building and the last doctor handed over the keys, William felt a strange emptiness in his heart. This hospital was his whole life. Here he met his wife, Margaret, who worked as a nurse in cardiology. Here his most beautiful and most terrible memories were born. Here he saw people being born and dying. Here he witnessed miracles and tragedies. Margaret had died 3 years earlier. Cancer. She lay in the same cardiology ward where she had worked for 30 years. William sat by her side every day, held her hand, and whispered to her that everything would be okay. But he knew he was lying. When the hospital closed, William had nowhere to go. His small pension barely covered the rent in the horrible apartment building where he lived alone after Margaret. The children lived abroad, rarely called. He barely saw his grandchildren. But he knew the hospital. Every corner, every secret passage, every key. He knew where the generators were, where the water tanks were, where he could get in without anyone noticing. He spent the first night there, out of curiosity. He entered through the old entrance that the janitors used and walked through the empty corridors. Moonlight filtered through the windows, casting strange shadows on the walls. But William wasn't afraid. This was his territory. He spent the second night there too, and the third. After a week, he realized he didn't want to go back to the apartment building. He felt at home here. He felt Margaret's closeness here. William carefully planned everything. He set up a small living space in the basement of the hospital. The old linen storage room had room for a bed, a small table, and a few personal items. Water still flowed through the pipes, and electricity could easily be reconnected. He never dared leave the building during the day. He knew that the security guard looked around once a day, but only superficially. Local young people sometimes broke in, but they only dared to visit the lower levels and never stayed long. William lived at night. When the city fell asleep, he came out of his hiding place and walked through the empty corridors. He cleaned. Yes, he still cleaned. He couldn't stop. After 30 years, this was the only thing he knew. The old cleaning equipment was in the storage room. William worked every night. He mopped the floors, wiped away dust, tidied up thrown garbage, as if the hospital were still operating, as if he were still needed. Months passed. William learned the rhythm of the neighborhood. He knew when the mailman came by, when the school children left, when the staff of the neighboring office building came home from work. He moved through the hospital like a ghost, invisibly, silently. But local residents began to notice things. They saw light in the windows when there shouldn't have been light. They heard noises when the building was empty. Someone claimed to have seen a figure walking along the third-floor corridor. "Ghost," people whispered. "The hospital is haunted." William heard these rumors when he went out shopping at the 24-hour store at night. He smiled to himself. If he was a ghost, so be it. At least they would leave him alone. Actually, he wasn't alone. At least he didn't feel that way. Margaret was there with him, not visibly, but tangibly. He talked to her while cleaning. He told her about his day, his thoughts, his dreams. "You know, Margaret, I saw a rat in pediatrics today," he said one night while mopping the corridor. "A nice big rat. I don't bother him, he doesn't bother me. Everyone needs a home." Years passed. William turned 66. His hair turned gray, his back bent, but he still worked, still cleaned. The hospital slowly deteriorated around him, but he didn't let it completely decay. At least not the parts where he lived. Sometimes there were visitors, young people looking for excitement, homeless people seeking shelter. William avoided them, but they didn't bother him. They somehow knew this was his territory. One night, an unexpected visitor arrived. A young woman, perhaps 25, in a white coat. William first thought he was hallucinating. Was it Margaret? No, this woman was younger, looked different. "Who are you?" William asked when the woman appeared in the corridor. "No one should be here," the woman replied. "This is dangerous." William laughed. "Dangerous?" "Young lady, I've been living here for 5 years. What could be dangerous?" The woman stepped closer. William then saw how pale she was, how tired. "I'm Dr. Mitchell," the woman said. I was, when I worked here." William nodded. He remembered the name. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a young doctor who died of a heart attack during surgery 5 years ago. "You're that janitor," the doctor said. "William, right? Margaret's husband." William looked at the woman. He knew this was impossible, but she seemed so natural, so real. "Yes," he finally replied. "I'm William." "Margaret talked about you a lot," the doctor said. "She spoke lovingly. She was proud of you." From that night on, William was not alone. Dr. Mitchell appeared regularly. Not every night, but often enough to be William's conversation partner. They talked about the old times, the patients, the doctors and nurses who worked there. If you're curious about what William experienced in those abandoned corridors and what surprising twist awaited him at the end of the story, then stay with me. But first, if you like the content, hit the like button and subscribe, because we bring such mysterious stories weekly that show reality is often stranger than fiction. William wasn't afraid of the doctor. In fact, he looked forward to their conversations. The doctor told him what it was like to work in the hospital, what patients she saw, what lives she saved or lost. William told his own stories, how he saw the same events through a janitor's eyes. "You know, William, you saw everything," the doctor said on one occasion. "Janitors always see everything. You are the ones who truly know the soul of a hospital." William nodded. This was true. He saw the doctors when they thought no one was watching them. He saw when they cried after losing a patient. He saw when they celebrated after a successful surgery. He saw the nurses when they hugged each other in the corridor at the end of a difficult day. "Everything happened here," William said. "I lived the truly important moments here." The doctor smiled. "And that's why you couldn't leave." "I couldn't," William admitted. "This is my home. Margaret is here. My memories are here." William lived in the hospital for 7 years. In 7 years, he transformed from a living person into a ghost. The locals were already telling legends about him. The hospital ghost who cleans at night and protects the building from vandals. There were those who claimed to see him. The figure of an elderly man slowly walking through the corridors. They saw light in the windows, experienced cleanliness in places where they expected vandalism. William was happy about these stories. He knew that this kept him safe. No one wants to linger in a haunted place. But in the 7th year, something changed. William felt increasingly tired. He found it increasingly difficult to do his work. He also had health problems but couldn't go to a doctor. How would he have explained where he lived? On a winter night, when snow thickly covered the building, William collapsed in the cardiology ward, exactly in the place where Margaret had worked for 30 years. Lying on the cold floor, William felt that he had finally found peace. He was in his place, here, where everything began, and now everything ended. Dr. Mitchell appeared beside him. "It's time, William," she said quietly. "I know," William whispered, "but who will clean?" The doctor smiled. "Someone else will. There's always someone." William nodded. He saw Margaret approaching him. She was young again, like when they first met. She smiled at him and extended her hand. "Come, William," Margaret said. "It's time to go home." William took his wife's hand and stood up. Nothing hurt anymore. He wasn't tired. He felt young, strong, healthy. They looked back at the hospital, which was now just an empty building. But William knew it wasn't completely empty. Someone else would take over his role. Someone else would watch over it. In the morning, the security guard found William's body. He looked like an elderly man who had somehow gotten into the building and died there. The police found no sign that William had lived there for years. His personal belongings, which he had accumulated in the basement storage room, were never found, as if they had simply disappeared. The local newspaper wrote a small article about the case. Elderly man died in abandoned hospital. Nothing more. No one knew who William really was and what he was doing there. But the locals knew. They knew because the hospital changed after William's death. It was no longer clean. The rats and pigeons returned. Vandals broke in again and destroyed things. The light disappeared from the windows. The ghost was gone. Or was it? A month after William's death, a young homeless man, James, entered the hospital seeking shelter. He was hiding from a storm and took refuge in the basement storage room. There he found a cleaning cart, cleaning supplies, and a small note with old handwriting that read, "The work never ends. Take care of the place. William." James read the message and warmth filled him. He didn't know who William was, but he understood the message. He took the mop and got to work. That night, locals again saw light in the hospital windows. William's story isn't just about one man's struggle with loneliness and loss. This story is about how someone can find purpose and meaning in the most unexpected places. William didn't live in the hospital because he had nowhere else to go. He lived there because he felt needed there. In modern society, we often forget that every place needs someone to watch over it. William understood this. He knew that the hospital, even if abandoned, was still a living thing. It breathes, remembers, and needs love. People thought he was a ghost because they couldn't imagine that someone would voluntarily stay in an abandoned place. They didn't understand that for William, this wasn't a prison, but home. Death didn't separate him from this place either. The message he left for James proves that responsibility and care survive us. William's soul passed on the baton. He knew that the place he loved would remain in good hands. James still lives there, not in the same secrecy as William did. The authorities know about him, but tolerate his presence. They see that he watches over the building, protects it from destruction. Sometimes he even gets help from the local government. St. Stephen Hospital is no longer abandoned today. It doesn't operate as a hospital, but there's someone who lives there, who loves it, who keeps it clean. The locals no longer avoid it. They know someone is watching over it. William's story shows that a real home isn't within four walls. A real home is where we feel needed, where we have purpose and meaning. It could be an abandoned hospital, an old house, or even a park bench. The point is to have something worth living for. And William also taught us that death doesn't mean the end. As long as someone remembers us, as long as someone continues what we started, we too live on. William is still there in that hospital, in James's every movement, every cleaning, every care. If you liked this unusual story and want to hear more mysterious and touching tales about those who took unusual paths in life, then hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring such true stories weekly that show reality is often more surprising and beautiful than fiction. The ghost, who was actually an elderly janitor, showed us that love and responsibility are stronger than any prejudice and fear. William Thompson's name may never have been put on a memorial plaque, but his life will forever remain an example of how to live with dignity and purpose, even under the most difficult circumstances.